I've got James Taylor with me. James been working hard today and working late. That's the reason we're getting going so late tonight with Facebook Live, but I appreciate him coming on. We're going to be talking about John David Mackey's death in Lonoke County Jail, September 17, 2020. If you guys have been following the posts and everything, I've been doing a series on it. John David Mackey died hours upon hours long agonizing death from peritonitis. According to the medical examiner, he had a gastric ulcer in his stomach, which is a hole in the stomach, which allowed bacteria to leak into the abdominal walls and cavity, which is called a massive infection, and basically it just eats you up from the inside, and it's extremely painful. Matter of fact, as defined, peritonitis is inflammation of the membranes of the abdominal wall and organs. Peritonitis is a life-threatening emergency that needs prompt medical treatment, that John David Mackey begged for and didn't get. Okay? So, hey, James, are you there, buddy?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, all right. James, before we talk about that, let's go ahead and cover something that a lot of people will ask about, just human nature, I guess. But you've got a criminal past, right?
I do.
Okay, and you have served time in the state prison system, correct?
Yes, sir, I have.
Okay.
I have.
And most of your stuff is due to, and you tell me if I'm wrong, but you and I have talked, most of your problems were due to drug addiction. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Okay, good. So since that time and everything, you are no longer on parole. You're not in any trouble or anything, and so you.
Nope,
Okay, go ahead. Tell us.
I'm flat. I just went flat on parole June the 10th.
Okay.
After 24 years, I have been to prison. I've been to prison 7 times. I've changed my life now. I've gotten clean. I've got a job. I've got a good woman. I'm about to get married. I've got my family back in my life. And I'm slowly. I mean, it's a rebuilding process, but I'm slowly doing it.
Well, good for you. I think that's great. And you and I have had several conversations, and usually they're late at night because you've been working 6-7 days a week, 12, 15 hours a day, right?
Yes, sir.
And which is a great thing, which is a great
Right.
thing. And so I know you're home. You just got home from work, and you from working all day, and I know you're tired. So I appreciate you taking time to come on with this. And let's go ahead and let's take it back to September 17, 2020. And why don't you tell us, what happened that day, not that night, but let's start with that day when you realized John Mackey was ill.
Okay, well, I of course, I was a shop trustee there. I worked in the shop there for almost a year, and I was in the shop that day, and it was hot. I know it was hot. It was super hot, and I'm not sure what we was mowing. We was doing a lot. It's just hot out there in that shop. I mean, when it's hot, and I had came inside to the Sally Port in the intake to go to T3, which is right across from where Mr. Mackey lived at the jail, and I had walked in and to get. I want to say I walked in to get some package of Kool-Aid, and for me and a couple guys that worked out there to shop with me. And when I came in, I went into my room and I'd heard somebody, kind of. It wasn't hollering because I'm sure he couldn't holler, but he was asking for help. He was begging for help, and I was I thought it was somebody in the drunk tank, the little thing they called the drunk tank there. And I looked in there and there was nobody in there, and I was like, "Who is that?" And they was like, Meeks was like the guy back there. He's been doing that for about for the last day, since yesterday, the day before the 17th, which was the 16th.
Okay. All right. Let me not cutting you off or anything, but tell everybody who Meeks is.
Meeks was the OIC over day shift, which day shift works from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. and Meeks was the OIC, the officer in charge. So he was over that shift. He was the head jailer over that shift.
Grant.
He was the one. He was the one to make every decision, for the shift. So
Right, and his first name is Grant. And so
Grant. His first name is
Okay, I just wanted everybody to know that. So, okay, take us back to where you were talking to Meeks, and he said even the day before he was sick. Go ahead and tell us about that again.
So he said he's been doing that since the day before, which was the 16th. He said he's been doing that. He said he's just a drug head, a dope head. He said exact words. He said he's just a dope head. He's just trying to get out to get some drugs. And I was like, man, no, I don't think it's what he's doing, man. I said, it sounds like that man needs help. I said, he's saying he can't breathe. And I said, I can hear it in his voice, that man can't breathe. And he said, yeah, he's full of shit. I said, man, I think he really serious. That man needs medical help, man. I said, he's begging for help back here. I said, maybe you might as well just go open the door and check on him, just to see, man, that's your job. And he said, well, he said, I ain't his fucking babysitter. He shouldn't have come to jail. Fuck him. And walked out there. I walked out. When I was walking out of intake, he was right behind me, walking out of intake. And he went outside to Sally Port and smoked. I came back around on the Polaris little Ranger thing they got, the UTV, 45 minutes later, and he was still standing out there smoking.
Mm-hmm.
And so we went back inside. So I go back to the shop. I get finished with my work, go back to the shop. We close everything down. And we go in that night. It was between 5:30 and 6 that night when we went in.
Okay.
And when I go in, my first thing I go in and we get showered. So the other two guys got a shower before I did, and when they got done with their shower, I went ahead and fixed my food while they were showering, so that way when I got out of the shower I could eat. Well, they got done with their shower. I had my food fixed. I went ahead and got my shower. And during that whole time, that probably an hour and a half passed between that time, and I hadn't heard Mr. Mackey, and I always heard him at night. I always heard him. No matter what, I always heard him. Even before he was sick, and this happened, I always heard Mr. Mackey. Always.
Okay.
And so I was just like, I kept thinking, man, I ain't heard him. Well, after I got out of my shower, and I got out, got everything, got dressed and stuff, and I went out to the intake and made a phone call to my family. And when I got done with my phone call, they had changed shifts, of course. At 6 o'clock, they changed shifts. The night shift was on. And Dean, I want to say, I don't recall her first name, but her name was, she was the OIC over that shift. Her last name's Dean, and I just called her CO Dean. That's what I called her. And she had walked in, and I said,
okay, let me stop just for a second. Okay, so at shift change, Meeks went off duty. Deputy Dean came in as the officer in charge for night.
Absolutely.
Okay. Go ahead, James.
So she was the officer in charge. So I knew that's who I had to go to, and so I went to her, and I know her from the past because she was a corrections officer at Little Tucker, and so I knew her from there. So
okay.
we knew each other before Lonoke County. And I said, Dean, would you do me a favor? And she said, if I can, I will. And I said, Mr. Mackey's back here. I said, he's been begging. He was begging for help earlier today, saying he couldn't breathe. And I said, I know the man. I know he couldn't breathe. I said, you could tell in his voice he couldn't breathe. You could tell he was really needing help, medical help. He was back here begging for it. And I said, I told Meeks about it, and Meeks said, fuck him. He ain't his babysitter. And I said, dude, he's really a piece of shit for that. Excuse my language.
No.
I
No.
said, he's really a piece of shit for that.
Yeah, you're fine, James.
And I did, and I told Meeks that day. I said, Meeks, I'm going to tell you something. If that man, something happens to that man that you could have prevented, I said, you will be the first person I ever sign a statement against. But you mark my words, I will write a statement on you if something happens to him you could have prevented. Because all I could do was ask, hey, please help that mummy guy. He needs help. That's all I could do as an inmate. Well, so Dean went in there. Dean had walked in, and she walked in the H part from the other side, and she came out. When she came out of the door in the intake there, I was right there, and she was just like, she was white as a ghost. And I said, he's dead, ain't he? And she said, yeah, he's dead. And I said, I said, son of a bitch. So, I mean, that's how it went down.
And
they came in. I guess she made the call. They kept Brandon Sawyer and Willie Shipp had just left, so of course they were the first ones there. And they went in there. They made us go back into T3. They went in there.
Now, so for everybody listening, if you watched the video the other night, the short portion of the video that I put, you see cell H3, and right directly across from that is T1, which T3, excuse me, T3, where you and two other inmates were housed. Is that correct, James?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And let me point out, I haven't posted the entire video yet, but I'm going to. I wanted to have James on first to tell the story, and then later on this week I'm going to post the entire video, which just is completely shocking. But the door to T3, even though James and the other inmates in there, is cracked open, which allowed you to hear things, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Go ahead, James. I'm sorry.
So they all came in. You know, they came in at different times, of course, and the hall was beginning to get crowded out there. And we were listening at the door, and I heard Brandon Sawyer said that when the paramedics arrived, sheriff said to tell him he had a pulse, and so he told that to the officers that were there.
Okay.
And so I guess they had moved Mr. Mackey to the floor, and they had started CPR with the CPR dummy, the machine, because we heard the machine saying begin CPR. We didn't know what it was, but we knew that's when we really realized. That's when we realized that he was really. I mean, he was all the way gone. He was. There was. He didn't. I mean, he just needed. The man just wanted help. That's all he wanted.
And let me say for those listening, and I've had to educate myself on CPR machines, even though I've got two sons that are first responders and know so many first responders. But the machine actually, when he said the machine, when James said the machine says start CPR, that's what the machine does. It actually, a voice actually speaks out of it in direction and everything. Just for the folks that may not know that. And so in James, what you hadn't seen yet, and what most folks hadn't seen, is the video, and that yes, the hallway was completely full. The first to get there is Deputy Maples and Sheriff Staley. Of course, Dean holds the door open for him. As I told everybody, even though in the statements from Dean and Maples saying that Maples and Staley took John David Mackey off the toilet where he was sitting on the toilet with his face in the sink, unresponsive, and basically was, all practical purposes, dead at that point. Maples and Dean stated that Maples and Sheriff Staley took him off the toilet, put him on the ground, did a sternum run, then began CPR. That's clearly not true, based off the video. Brandon Sawyer and Willie Shipp were the next to come. Well, let me back up. Mark Doyle, who was a dispatcher, he came with the machine. Of course, really didn't do much. Then Sawyer and Maples and Maples was there, but Willie Shipp, Deputy Willie Shipp, came. And then 3 Lone Oak PD, not Sheriff's Department, but Lone Oak PD, city PD officers show up. And then later, then of course a local firefighter showed up. Then 2 from the ambulance service, paramedic and EMT, and then Sergeant Michael Davis. So it was a crowded hallway. No question about that. I would like to go ahead and point out, for those of you that don't remember, when we talk about Brandon Sawyer has been convicted of 13 felonies and is currently on parole and was on parole at that time. Sheriff Staley hired him. He is on the budget as a jailer. Now, Sheriff Staley will try to tell people that he's a maintenance guy, and he's not. I mean, he may do some maintenance work, but he does jailer duties. I myself witnessed this about 2.5 weeks ago and videoed him doing such with keys to the jail. And when he's in the video, a few people watched it, and you'll see he is in a jailer attire with a ball cap that says sheriff on it. Now, when I say that about Brandon Sawyer, I'm not talking bad about Brandon Sawyer. It's more about Sheriff Staley putting Brandon in that position and making demands that Brandon do things he shouldn't be doing. And so, let me make clear from my understanding, Brandon has done a really good job of getting off drugs and has been clean for some time and is trying to do right. But people also have to remember he is under the thumb of Sheriff Staley, and so I don't want to start jumping on Brandon Sawyer. I just want to make the point that he's doing duties that he should not be doing, and so I just want to make that clear. Now, James, so at that point, what else do you hear? Do you hear them loading him up, taking him down the hall, or?
We heard the ambulance. We did hear the paramedics. We heard them when they came in. They was out there for some minutes, and we heard them put him on the. We heard them load him up, and when we heard when heard they were loading him up, I'm taking it. That's whenever they kind of knew we were listening at the door, and one of them rushed back or kicked the door with their foot and kicked our door shut. So we kind of got away from the door at that moment.
Okay.
And and then they took him out of there. It was I want to say it was close to 11 whenever they got him out of there. And we went in to clean the. Brandon had came and got us somewhere between I'm going to say 10, 20, and.
Now, James, let me back up. You may be a little bit confused on the time, but this actually took place. The Sheriff Staley and them actually got to him at 9:23, and so it was like 10. It was probably 10, when they come in. Brandon came and got us to clean. It was probably around 9 between 9:55 and 10, somewhere around there. I know it was before 10 because we got done. We were done cleaning it. I know this. We were done cleaning it at 10:10. And that makes sense because the timestamp on the photos that I obtained through the Freedom of Information Act on the cells say 10:01, 10:02, 10:03. But take me back to Brandon Sawyer coming to get you and a couple of other inmates. And did he come to your cell?
Yes, he come to our cell. He had hit the button outside the cell, and he said, I told him, pop T3, because it normally it stayed open, the door never shut. Mm. And so he done pop T3, and he told us to, he had some chemicals, RJ8, and another chemical in the red and white bottle that they had there at the jail, and he handed us each one a bottle of RJ8 and the other two a bottle of the red and white, the whatever in the red and white bottle, I forget what the name of it is, but he handed us all them and gave us some gloves and told us to go in there. So we thought, that it might have been COVID because they were using that as a cell, H pod was a COVID. You had to go in there. That was a quarantine pod. When I went to jail, when I first got locked up there in May, it was May. It was a quarantine pod. So we thought, maybe it was COVID.
Right.
We didn't know what we didn't know what Mr. Mackey had died from.
Right.
So we assumed it was something COVID related,
Right.
And so we gloved up and a couple pair of gloves each, and we went in there and we sprayed everything down. Well, I was spraying RJ8. I sprayed it, the cell, everything had been took out of it already. His mat, his clothes, everything was out of it. But I think there was a cup. There was a styrofoam cup sitting somewhere, I do remember, just vaguely there was a styrofoam cup in there, and but the sink, when I sprayed the sink down, there was like it was like a real, I don't know, it was stomach bile. It was like a real. Some of it was a real light colored, and some of it was a darker color, and it was like in the sink and on the back of the sink, and then there was on the outside of the ring of the toilet there was a real dark substance, and I figured that was where he had used the bathroom on himself when he died. Is what I figured. So we sprayed all that down, and we were done, and we went back. We got showers again because we thought it was COVID again.
Sure.
So we got showers, and that was I do know we were done cleaning at 10 minutes after 10. I do know that for a fact.
Okay, and
so, then we seen them go in, and that's when they took some pictures then.
Okay, so you remember them taking pictures, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We were out in the hallway.
What do you remember? Who took those? Was that Detective Smith, or who was it?
To be honest with you, I'm not even gonna say, because I don't remember seeing Kevin Smith there. I don't. But when we came out of the cell, like I said, when we came out of the cell, when we went in, there was only Staley, Maples, Dean, Ship, and Sawyer had came in, and they were when they were coming in, they were making us go back to our cell. Actually, the other guy that came in later after they came in, the other guy that was there with us, he was actually on the phone to his family, so they didn't make him come in until he got done with his phone call.
Okay.
So that's why you see him come in late.
Okay.
And so I don't remember. I didn't get to see any. I remember hearing them. I remember hearing Kevin Smith out there, but no, Kevin Smith isn't who I seen take the pictures.
Okay. But when you cleaned the cell, you were the one doing the sink and everything, and
yes.
So peritonitis is a very ugly sickness, and it causes extreme bloating, extreme nausea, high fever, extreme heart rate, extreme abdominal pain, and would cause a lot of vomiting. And from what you're describing, it sounds like there was a lot of stomach bile or vomit in the sink. And this is kind of graphic, but there really wasn't any pieces. It was more liquid. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yes. There was no food. Like so I would just. Well, I know that I had seen Mr. Mackey's tray for 2 days. I know I'd seen it, and it was slid back out the door, and Mr. Mackey hadn't touched anything on his tray.
Okay, so based off that, he slid the tray back out, but hadn't eaten anything.
Yes.
Of course, with that condition, who would eat, right?
Right.
Okay, and so let me back up just a little bit, and then we'll go into the interview you did with Detective Kevin Smith. Okay. When you approached Meeks, Deputy Meeks, about getting John David Mackey helping, and let's go ahead and clear this, you really didn't know John David Mackey, did you?
I did not, but I just, when I heard it, I thought about, what if that was me, or what if that was what if that was my brother? And I thought, that's somebody's son, somebody's daddy.
Yes,
so
and
that's what I thought about.
And when you heard him in the cell, asking for help, saying I can't breathe, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, did Mackey sound desperate?
Absolutely, he sounded like. I mean, I could tell that he really needed. I could tell he needed help.
Okay, yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about it. With the way he died, that's just, oh my God. And
like the man couldn't scream. He couldn't scream. He couldn't really holler. You could tell that it was like everything he was saying. The man, you could tell he was having a very hard time saying it.
Did you feel, by the way he was talking, of course you couldn't see him and everything, did you feel like he was probably in a lot of pain?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. And so when you approached Meeks, and like I say, you told us what Meeks said, which is just, there are no words for that. And when Meeks said that and then walked out to smoke and just pretty much said no and left you there, that must have been pretty frustrating for you.
Yeah, it was. I told him about it. I did. I told him about himself. I told him. I said, man, it's your job, man. You're a piece of shit. So I want to let you know that. I said, you are a piece of shit. If you don't like your job, man, you need to quit.
Did you?
That's what I.
No, I don't blame you.
That's exactly what I told him. That's my exact words.
I think you hit the nail on the head with it. Let me ask you this, and here again, like I said, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but did you think at this point Mackey was dying?
I knew the man. I ain't gonna say I ain't gonna say that I knew he was dying, but I knew that the sound of his voice. If he didn't get help, if they didn't help him, I knew that whatever happened to him wasn't gonna be good. I knew that. I knew that I knew that man was in there in a bad way. I could tell that he was in there in a very bad way, and he needed medical help. And if he didn't get it, I mean, it's obvious that I felt it because
sure.
I told Meeks, I did tell Meeks exact words. I said, you can mark my words, Meeks. If something happens to that man that you could have prevented, I will absolutely, you will be the first person I ever write a statement on.
Right.
If you got my word on that, I will write a statement on you if something happens to him that you could have prevented.
Right, and that's understandable, and that's why I asked if you were frustrated, because at that point, you've done all you can do.
Right.
And your hands are pretty much tied as far as getting him help. You went to the right channel to do it, and they said no. And
right.
in your situation, I can see that being very frustrating because what else are you going to do?
Right.
Yeah,
I can't open the door.
No, absolutely not. And I want to go back to also H3, for people to understand it, is very close to intake where a lot of activity happens. And a lot of people go in and out of intake and down that hall to go to the lobby of the sheriff's office and stuff. So there's quite a bit of traffic through there, correct?
Yes.
And because I've talked to other people who heard John David Mackey, and those are people that, were going through or passing through and hearing him, and male and female inmates heard him. And what I find that is the staff had to have known, even without you telling Meeks, had to have known what bad shape this guy was in.
Yes, you could clearly hear that man begging for help. Like there was no ignoring it or no not hearing it. If you were in intake, then you heard that man begging for help.
Yeah.
There's no, unless you were deaf, you heard that man begging for help.
Yeah, and that's very disturbing. That's very disturbing. And I want to go. I want to make it clear too that when you guys went into the cell to clean it, you had already stated, but I want to make sure people understand this because it's an important point. Everything had been stripped out of that cell, and the bedding was gone, and everything. And the point I want to make on that, when talking to law enforcement, tons of different law enforcement people, investigators, detectives, scene analysts, crime scene analysts, the time to take those pictures was before anything was done in that cell. And the point I want to make to everybody is no pictures were taken of the cell to the cell and until after the cell had been stripped and cleaned. To do it correctly, which begs the question why. And I contend it's because they didn't want pictures of puke and feces, and that would be evidence that Mr. Mackey didn't just have a heart attack, that Mr. Mackey had been in a bad medical condition, and that would have been evidence of such. And it's a shame we can't see what was on the sheets or the bedding. But to take those, to clean the cell and then take the pictures just does not add up at all unless you're trying to cover something up. And so I wanted to make that point on that. Okay, so he's dead. You know, that had to be very disturbing for you and the other inmates. And so, but did the mentality with the staff is just kind of like once Mackey was gone and the cell was clean, it's just poof, it's gone. Like we're back to normal.
I never heard another word about it. I heard about it from one other guy, and that was Kevin Smith.
Now that's what I want to talk about next. Kevin Smith
Yes.
is a detective for the Longwood County Sheriff's Office.
Super good guy. Super good.
Yeah, I heard really good things about Detective Smith. I heard very good things about Detective Smith. And so Detective Smith took a statement from you and basically interviewed you, correct?
Yes, he did.
Okay. How long from the 17th, it wasn't that day and it wasn't the next day, how long was it before he interviewed you?
Okay, well, it wasn't. He had tried to interview me right after he knew that it was. I was upset about it. He had tried.
Okay, when was that, James?
I want to say 2 days after this had happened. It was I know it was 17th when Maggie died, and I want to say the 19th is when he came to me and asked me about it. If I wanted to, was there something I wanted to tell him about it? And, of course, I'll tell everybody, of course, it was a long process for me to decide to do this because I'm affiliated with NAE, so doing this is not something that, it was a big process for me to find out, was it okay? It took a couple weeks.
Sure.
And I found out that it was fine, and so that's why it took so long for that to happen with Kevin Smith, is because I wanted to make sure that everything I did was all right, because I also have, we go by, we have rules we go by, and when I found out everything was right, he came to me and he was like,
So when you say we have rules we go by, you're talking about as far as a group of inmates or prisoners, right? Kind of a code deal. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, yeah. And because you said you were, you were a member of what?
NAE.
Okay, and what is NAE?
NAE is Aryan Brotherhood. It is we're a brotherhood.
Okay.
We protect the rights of women and children. Is what we do.
Okay. No, I just want to be clear with everybody, and like I say, you're an honest guy, and that's what I want to make clear to everybody. Every time I've talked to James, has just been extremely honest and to the point, and so that's why I don't want to hold anything back from anybody. And you're not. You're telling it. So I just want to make clarification on that. So basically, you were looking to get the okay from the group you belong to talk to Detective Smith, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So you got the green light.
I got the green light, and he came to me, and this was probably it was somewhere between a week and a half to 2 weeks after the 17th, and he came to me, and I got the okay about it. I got the okay, but I didn't go to him. I got it a couple of days before I talked to him, and he came, and he was like, he came in one day, he parked his truck outside. I was in the shop working, and he walked up in the shop. He was like, They asked me again. He said, "You want to talk to me about what happened in the jail?" And I said, "Yeah, I do."
Okay, good. All right, so go ahead.
And so he, of course, he told Brandon Sawyer that he had me, and we went in the interview room, and he asked me, just what I've already said tonight. He asked me what happened, and I told him. And when I told him the story. I told him what had happened, and then I wrote it down on paper. On beat. I wrote it on me. He deserves to be punished for what he did.
Okay, let me ask you this, and I'm sorry, I was writing notes as you were talking. I was listening. Don't think I would. I was just writing some notes. He was talking.
Right.
So you told him about Meeks. Did he talk to you specifically and want to know about Meeks's actions?
Yes.
Okay. And so did he specifically ask you about Meeks in the sense, okay, tell me about.
He said that you want to say. He asked. This is what he asked me. He said his question was. He said, "Do you want to talk to me about what happened in the jail?" And I said, "Yeah." And so when I went and talked to him, and I told him, and he said, and yeah, that's what he wanted. He wanted to know because I guess they heard that I said, what I told Meeks, I told Meeks to do it. He was hollering, and I guess they found that out.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess Kevin Smith did, and he was concerned, and so he came and talked. He came and asked me, did I want to talk to him about what had happened back there, what I told Meeks and what Meeks had did. After I told him, and I said, yeah, I want to talk to you about it. So, and that's what he wanted to know. He wanted to know specifically about what Meeks did when I told him the man was begging for help.
Okay, good. And did he record this interview?
I want to say I'm not. Don't quote that. I'm not 100% sure on this,
right.
But I think so.
Okay. And did he ask you to write a written statement for him?
Yes. I did write a written statement.
Okay, good. And the reason I wanted to talk about that is because when I was FOIing, sending Freedom of Information requests, I knew there were statements, and I met with Alan Dodson, who's the attorney for Lonoke County, and that was one of the things that they didn't want to give me because they said it was under law. There's a thing called a record of performance, and I'll let everybody know out there I'm not an attorney. I'm not trying to play attorney. Don't have a degree. Didn't go to college or anything. So I'm not trying to pass myself off as that. But I know the law in the Arkansas Freedom of Information Act very well. And so they were correct not to give that to me because at the point, and I'll tell everybody why, at the point that he is asking you specifics about Meeks's actions, that deems that as a record of performance on an employee. The only way that's disclosable under the Freedom of Information Act if those specific actions resulted in a suspension or termination. Now, I'm going to tell everybody why that's important. I'm going to say that again. The only way they can give me that document is if it resulted in a suspension or termination. And what's so bad about it is they didn't give it to me because it didn't result in a suspension or termination, which it should have resulted in termination. And I contend charges. So the point here I'm making is Sheriff Staley knew what happened. Detective Smith had taken your statement. Everybody knew, yet Sheriff Staley chose not only not to terminate Meeks, but to not even suspend him.
Right.
Which, if anybody's been following what I've been investigating and making public about Sheriff Staley, that's not going to surprise them. And it didn't shock you that Meeks was still there several days after it happened, right?
No.
I mean,
he's been that way ever since I've been in jail. He didn't care about anybody but himself. That was it.
Yeah, and so the point there is, yes, by law they're not supposed to give it to me. I don't want it because by law they're not supposed to give it to me. And me and Alan Dodson have had this conversation that I don't want any information that should not be disclosed. But the question is, why didn't they terminate him? But I think that goes back to the mentality of Sheriff Staley. And I think that mentality resonates throughout the entire jail. And but I did want to make clear with folks on that. So after you talked to Detective Smith, did anything else happen after that? Did anybody come back to you? Was there anything else said?
Never.
So it's just poof, like that's in the past, and you know.
And there was people that worked there at the jail. People that worked there that never had a clue that he had even died. That anybody had even died there.
That's what I'm finding. That's what I found when I started into this, is that nobody really knew about this, except the inmates and a couple of jailers and Sheriff Staley and a few people. I mean, it was really kept quiet. And I want to go back to something you said about Detective Smith, because I want to make something clear to people. You just said a few minutes ago, Detective Smith's a good guy, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And what I want to make clear to people in conversations with James, I want to make clear, James is not a cop hater.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, and James, and I won't go into names or anything, but James has talked about several officers in Lonoke County that he really likes and thinks are really good people. Of course, there's going to be some he doesn't care for, and just like I don't care for Sheriff Staley. And because James and I have talked about it, is when you have people that take an oath to uphold the law and they commit violent criminal acts, then that's a whole new level with me. But I want to make clear that James and I have talked, and I don't want to name names because I don't want to get people, but you actually think highly of a lot of officers down there, right?
I mean, very highly of some of them. A few of them that quit. You know, they were super good to me for the year I was there. And some of them, them's wife. Some of them's wife was one of them's wife was. She put me in prison 6 of the 7 times I've been.
Right.
And I mean, they did. I mean, he did so much for me.
Right.
You know, if he's listening, he knows who he is.
Right.
But
and
they did so much from while I was there. But I mean, it's crazy.
Now I'm also going to be clear. There's some officers that you don't think much of, like Meeks per se and stuff, right?
Yes, there sure is.
But the reason I bring that up to everybody is I want everybody to know James is not a cop hater and every cop's bad or anything. He said some very nice things about a lot of officers down there, which I think that point needs to be made, because I don't want anybody to think that James has an axe to grind here. This thing has really bothered you ever since it happened. Is that correct?
It has.
And just so everybody knows, through my work on Sheriff Staley and stuff, I didn't know anything about John David Mackey, never heard it, didn't know anything about the death or anything, and how I found out about it is James. And I guess, James, you'd been watching a lot of my posts, right?
I had.
And James made a few comments and then reached out to me, and I'm so glad he did, because nobody would know about this. Nobody would know that John David Mackey died a horrific, hours-long torturing death in Lonoke County Jail, and he didn't have to. John David Mackey should be alive today, and we wouldn't even be talking about it had James not reached out to me. So I want everybody to know that that's how I got on this, is because James reached out and told me about it, or nobody would know this. Nobody would know this. And James, you and I've talked. You kind of reached out because this thing has really been eating at you a long time, hasn't it?
It has.
And
it has since 2020.
And I think that's important for people to know, that we're talking about a guy that James really didn't even know, but that's how horrific the circumstances were, that it's hung around with James and really bothered him all this time. And I've talked to other inmates that were there at the time that I'm not going to mention their name, and that don't want their name mentioned, but feel the same way, that this whole thing was very upsetting, to literally sit there for 2 days and hear a man beg for his life, knowing that he's extremely ill, and for people just to say no. When James goes to Deputy Meeks and says, hey, you got to do something, and you're met with just a no, then yeah, that would stick with me too, knowing that a man died that didn't have to.
Because I'm sure he knew what was wrong. I'm sure John David Mackey, I'm sure he knew what was wrong with him. I'm sure he did. And I'm sure that's why he was begging. He knew. I'm sure I mean, I'm almost positive he probably knew what was going on with him. I'm sure it's probably not the first time that it's acted up. I mean, I'm sure ulcer acts up more than, that's something that you get, I don't know, I'm not a doctor again, but I'm sure it's not something that you just heal up overnight with.
No, and with the leakage into the abdominal cavity, and basically what it does, it sets off such an infection that it's just basically, it's just eating your organs, and your intestines and everything are all infected. And I mean, it's just a horrible, painful way to die, that he didn't have to die. And James, I really appreciate you doing this. I know we've been trying to work to get it done. You're working so much, which is a great thing, that we've been trying to schedule, but I think it's important for everybody to hear the truth about what happened on that. And I think it's important, and I truly do appreciate you coming on. And the one thing I do appreciate most is your complete honesty. That you're not hiding anything about you, and you're not hiding anything about your past. And I think that's important for people to know, that you've been extremely honest and transparent. And so I think that's important. And James, I really appreciate it, buddy. I thank you for doing it. And I'm sure we're going to be talking, you and I will be talking again soon. How's that?
That's all right.
All right, thank you, James. Have a good evening. All right, thank you. Bye. Okay, guys, that was James Taylor. I think the takeaway there is that we already have the evidence before we talked to James. Now we've talked to James that backs up the evidence that I presented. The thing I want to remind everybody is that James has been his honesty in it. He will tell you he was part of the Aryan Nation group. Okay, he will tell you that before he talked to Detective Tevin Smith, he basically had to get permission to do that, and he will tell you that he has committed criminal acts, and he's upfront about it. He's not hiding anything about himself, and I think that part of the honesty goes a long way in believing what he's saying. I do think it's really good too that James is no longer on drugs. He's trying to get away from that whole other lifestyle. I can tell you from trying to talk to him, the guy is literally working 6-7 days a week, 12, 15 hours a day, building and installing cabinets. So that's the reason it was so late tonight. And so, all of those are good, positive things that James has turned around. He's talked about prayer with me, and how he's trying to talk to God more and things, which I think is a wonderful thing. And he seems to have a good life going with a nice young lady that he's about to be wed to. But I think it's important to point out his extreme honesty about his past. And I think that really lends to his credibility on this. Plus the fact that all the evidence that I put forth so far back everything up James is saying. And when I present the entire over 13-minute video from the jail of that night, it's going to back up his story even more. And the bottom line is James is telling the truth. And I want to go back to it real quick. This is the toilet and sink John David Mackey died on. That's where the man died. Was John David Mackey ever going to be Man of the Year? No. Was he ever going to get Dad of the Year award? No. John David Mackey, the reality is he was a drug addict, but he died a horrific, painful death that he did not have to do. And at the end of the day, yes, I'll say it right now, that falls on Meeks. A lot of this falls on Meeks because at some point you got to say, even though the sheriff says, hey, we're only going to do this and nobody's calling an ambulance unless I give it, and we're not going to do that. At some point you got to say, no, this is not, this, I can't make a living doing this. At some point you got to say, no, that's wrong. And you got to stand up. And you stand up and do what's right. And that didn't happen that night. That not just didn't happen with Meeks, it didn't happen with Maples or Dean either. A lot of falsehoods that night, just plain out lying, happened, and we've already proven that. We're going to prove it more going forward. So do this. If anybody's got any questions, put them in comments. I'll do my best to answer them. If you got some questions for James, I'm sure James doesn't mind answering. Like I say, he's upfront and honest about everything. We got a lot more coming. Like I say, in a few days, I'm going to post the entire video with some more lines and things that are going to be really shocking. I've tried to do it in bits and pieces because this case is so big. But hang in there with me, and I'll get the entire video out there. And we're going to do our best to get some justice on this because John David Mackey deserves justice. So, yeah, I appreciate you guys so much, and I'm sorry we got started late tonight. And, I hope everybody has a good evening.